Okay, good evening members. Welcome to tonight's Licensing and Safety Committee. We have apologies for absence. Want me to read them out? Shall I go? We've got apologies from Councillor Peake, Councillor Howcroft-Scott, Councillor Filmer, but we're expecting Councillor Nain, hopefully, and Councillor Sands. Can I sign the record of the meeting held on the 10th of December 2024 as correct? Is that agreed, members? Thank you. I have no urgent matters. Are there any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest or other significant interest this evening or for the agenda? No. Great. Okay, I'm handing over now to Emily, who's going to introduce the item, the Hackney Carriage Tariff Review Policy, pages 11 to 26. And we have got Nigel here. Nigel, I will bring you in after we've introduced the report. Is that okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On the 10th of December 2024, this committee asked officers to consult the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire trade in relation to the proposed draft Hackney Carriage Tariff Review Policy. On the 16th of December 2024, an email was sent to 472 drivers, and they had until the 26th of January 2025 to submit their comments, a 6-week period. During this time, we received 4 responses from individual drivers, and these can be found at Appendix B on page 19. The MLTDA had submitted discussion. Apologies. The MLTDA team had many discussions with the trade, which influenced the questions that they put into a survey. The survey was sent out to all members. However, due to drivers not updating their email address with the association, only 97 were successfully delivered. They received 58 responses to this survey, which assisted them in compiling their response. The MLTDA response can be found in Appendix C between pages 21 and 24. Officers have provided their comments in response to the consultation for members' consideration. This can be found in Appendix D, pages 25 and 26. So we are asking this committee to either recommend approval of the draft Hackney Carriage Tariff Review Policy as shown in Appendix A to the Business Support and Digital Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Cabinet and Full Council, or recommend changes to the Hackney Carriage Tariff Review Policy prior to approval by Business Support and Digital Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Cabinet and Full Council. We are also asking the committee to recommend the changes to the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Policy dated 2021 to 2026, as detailed in paragraphs 2.2 to 2.4 of this report for approval by Business Support and Digital Overview and Scrutiny Committee and Cabinet and Full Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Nigel, would you like to... members, we asked Nigel, like he has done before, to just present. I know is members content with that for this evening? Yeah. You do actually, yeah.
We do.
Sorry.
They give me 2. Give me 2.
Is that okay, Nigel? Over to you. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair, and thanks for allowing me to attend the meeting this evening. Officers have recommended a biannual review of the tariff based on the previous requests of the tariff review. As explained in previous MLTDA reports through tariff increases, the trade has often been cautious and perhaps reluctant to increase the fare due to out-of-town vehicles working in the area. This does not mean to say that conversations have not been had annually by the MLTDA regarding the tariff. Obviously, once the policy comes into place, the responsibility of putting forward the tariff and the frequency of it is down to the council. Therefore, in a lot of drivers' opinion, it needs to be annual. Recent events kind of compounded that necessity for an annual review. If we just look at the last 2 tariff reviews, Medway had a fare increase in September 22 to raise the cost of a 2-mile journey from £6.60 to £7. The cost of living crisis hit in 2023, and we had a second tariff review that commenced in August 23 and was implemented in March 24 to increase the cost of a 2-mile journey to £8. If the trade did not have this opportunity for a second tariff review in 2023, only a few months from the previous increase, the trade would have been running at a massive loss and would have been on its knees. This, in my view, strongly justifies the necessity for an annual review. It's not to say that the trade would increase the fare every year, but we need that option to have a yes or no, would we like to increase the fare? It would not impact on the service delivery from the licensing department to simply send out an annual email with a yes or no, would you like to review the tariff every year? I mean, obviously, it's fair to say that if, for example, the licensing department that is funded by licensing fees reviews our financial position annually to ensure their sufficient survey levels are met, and indeed increases licence fees annually, and the trade should have the same ability to monitor the tariff to ensure stability within the trade. I would like to highlight one issue on the officer comments section, which I feel may be misleading. It basically states the officer comments applying an inflationary uplift to the tariff. This, I mean, for example, if we look at the last 12 months interest rates, it currently stands at 3% from January to January. It's not impractical amount to be mentioned, excuse me. This inflationary amount can quite easily be incorporated into the tariff by decreasing the yardage element of the fare. So that can be quite easily done, whereas in the officer comments it states it cannot be. So I therefore think it could be misleading. There is two sides to the inflationary uplift argument of a tariff increase. And also I would like to just highlight one other issue within the officer comments where there's an error, which again could be deemed as misleading. The amount of statistics quoted in the section 5 on the officer comments for member awareness is incorrect, unfortunately. The Medway fare for a 2-mile journey is £8, not £8.20 as quoted in the officer comments. So Medway is now 8th out of 12 districts, not 5th. So I just wanted to highlight that to the committee. Thank you.
It's working now. Okay, thank you, Nigel. So just for clarity for members, before they ask. All gone. No, this one's working.
Oh, this one's working.
Yeah. It was just a comment about the inflation rate, because obviously I want Mark and Emily to be able to come back as well. And then there was that part at the bottom you're saying about it was the wrong fare, the wrong standard. Okay, just to note that. Mark or Emily, did you want to come back for us, or would you rather hear from members than you come back on your points? Members, do you want? Should we hear back from officers, or should we? Or yeah, first. Yep. Mark and Emily, if that's okay.
Thank you. Sorry. Yes, thank you, Chair. No, it's really useful to hear the thoughts from Nigel on behalf of the MLTDA. In terms of the frequency of review, I can't disagree that sending out a simple survey asking whether the trade would or would not like to have a tariff review, I can't say that that would be problematic. That wouldn't cause issues within the service. However, the process of reviewing the tariff thereafter, if the trade did say that they wanted one, that is onerous. You know, that there's a lot more officer time involved behind the scenes than is probably apparent. And, you know, indeed to go from a situation where the trade have had the opportunity to ask for a review without restraint at any time, but have chosen not to for many, many years, to then go to an annual review is quite a leap, I would suggest. And that is an additional burden on the team, which would naturally therefore have a negative impact on the service delivery in other areas. It's not, of course, our intention to adversely impact the trade, but we do have to point out from an operational perspective that there would be an impact arising from that.
Thanks, Mark. Members? Councillor Fern.
Yep, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Nigel and Emily and Mark, for the report and for the work you've done on this. I know you guys have always worked hard, and absolute credit to you on that. I think what is quite interesting to me, and the chairman as well, I mean, we've spoken about this in the past, the fact that the engagement with us is never going to be as good as it is with Nigel and the MLTDA. However, I think I'd like to understand a little bit more about the way that we take this survey. We go with our survey to the trade. How do we do that? Could we not simplify it a little bit and have those questions like Nigel does and make it sort of easier? A survey monkey type thing that attracts the results for us. And because he's got quite a decent response. I don't know how it compares to sort of in the past and other things he's done, but I think it's something that perhaps we need to learn from across the council, in all services, but certainly here, and maybe we could lead the way in licensing to sort of develop that and bring that forward. So I think, I'd like to understand a little bit more. I don't know if you could just go over how you went out to the trade and what you do. Is it a big document like we get as members? Is that what it is? And then they get the chance to sort of reply or what? Can we, and then how we can then perhaps simplify that going forward? Understand Nigel's point and MLTDA point about the sort of annual review. I mean, what are there any other services, any out of area, any areas that do an annual review, or is it a biannual thing, or how does it work out in other areas, for that? And also, could we add in there, like a one-liner, a little one paragraph somewhere that there's the option for a sort of inflation increase of whatever percentage or whatever inflation is, so they could just go up. It could go up annually if you wanted to, rather than then causing, because I understand that would cause a lot more work for your team. I get that. So is there anything that we could actually add into that policy that would just sort of automatically generate that? So a couple of points there.
Mark?
Yes, thank you. Apologies in advance if I forget one of those questions. So in terms of the consultation with the trade when doing a tariff review, there's no reason why we couldn't use a format such as SurveyMonkey, because we would be able to build our own online platform that could compile and assess those results in a similar way. We would need to make sure that every driver had accessibility to that platform, and indeed we'd need drivers to respond on an individual basis. If there was one response coming from a trade body on behalf of those drivers, that would not be representative and that would skew the results. So that's just one thing to bear in mind. But certainly, I think, speaking on behalf of the team, and I say we'd be very much up for an efficient, streamlined approach to this that would work for everyone. In terms of, sorry, what was your second question?
With the frequency and if any other license areas do annual reviews.
So from my understanding, it's a mixed bag. I think we did look at this and most don't, I think. I think it's worth just pointing out that this, the concept of creating a policy came from officers to provide our trade with a platform to give them a frequency of review that they didn't have before. So had this not been brought to the table with an offer of doing that to try and benefit the trade, then dare I say we'd still be in the position now where such an opportunity didn't exist, and we'd still be faced with what is the current policy, whereby it would have to be trade-led, which, as we know from history, hasn't happened. So I think that there's no hard and fast rule. It could be, it could be annual for some, biannual for others, even less so. It is entirely at the discretion of the authority. And the final question was about inflationary uplifts. I mean, again, it's for the licensing authority to set fares if they so wish, and so it's completely within the gift of the licensing authority to make that decision. There are some practicalities to it that have to be considered. I mean, I take Nigel's point, but I think applying, a 3% change to 170 yard, 20p per 170 yard increase would be challenging. There is a cost to the trade to have their meters changed, and there is, even if that's done, even if that is feasible, there is still an element of operational impact on officers who need to make sure that each one of the, I think it's around just shy of 600 vehicles, has their meters updated every single time as well. So it's not impossible, it's just impractical.
I appreciate it, Mark, and thank you for that. So I would like us, or your team, to sort of take away offline, I mean, if it's agreed with the chairman, that we do look at some, improvements to the consultation. I think that would be a really good, that would be a benefit to us, and learn from what these guys have done. Yeah, I sort of understand and accept your answers around that. I mean, my sort of thought really is, I just want us to sort of be seen that we're supporting the trade, and that was hence my comment, for the sort of increase. I mean, I wouldn't know what we'd put in there, but it's just that we are listening. Nigel, if you can take that back to to all of your members, we are listening, and we do want to help you, and we want to work together. So.
I mean, I think just two things, Nigel. I'm going to come back from the engine. Mark, thank you for your response, and I will come back on my points as well. Just, I did see you shaking your head around the meterage, and because we're definitely not meter experts, us guys here. So, is it a complicated approach to meter part?
Well, initially when I met with Maddie Francis, the first thing she said was, I do not understand how the meter works, because it is quite a complicated cookie, but it's very simple once you've been educated on the subject. For example, in order to do a 3% uplift on a tariff, the most sensible option would be to reduce the yardage by 3%, which would take it down from 170 yards to the nearest yard, which would be 165 yards, which would then increase the fare of a 2 mile journey, for example, to £8.20. I've already done the calculations, it took me 2 minutes. So it's a very simple process to implement, but my main area of concern is around the methodology of the policy itself, whereas it can be quite restrictive to just concentrate solely on flag and yardage. The meter does several wonderful things, and it can alter the fare in various different ways. For example, if you were to jump in a taxi in Gravesham, the meter would work differently to as if you jumped in a taxi in Medway. But there's certain distances the meter can travel where it will charge X amount, and then so on and so forth. Each mile would be a different price. We always use the 2 mile benchmark is kind of an average to gauge where we are nationally. But obviously, for example, I can't understand with this policy, because obviously the first time I saw this policy, or the MLTDA team saw this policy, was when it went to committee back in December. Previous to that, we'd have several discussions which have been really, really constructive, and on the policy back in March last year. So it's been a long time since we've had discussions on this, and the policy that we discussed in March last year was, well, it's completely different. There's not one single word that's the same on the methodology, apart from the first two opening paragraphs, which are just the legal jargon. So from that perspective, there are questions around how do we, for example, ensure that the waiting time is correct and fit for purpose. If a taxi in Medway is hired on time only at the moment, it's 20 pence for every 40 seconds of waiting time. So if a vehicle is hired on time only, that equates to £18 per hour for waiting time according to the meter. Now, we've done a lot of research with this with the MLTDA team on costs and how much a driver needs to turn over based on a 45-hour working week to guarantee minimum wage. Now, bearing in mind minimum wage has gone up, that figure now currently stands at about £23.50. The average driver needs to turn over per hour to guarantee himself minimum wage, based on a 45-hour working week. Hence why a lot of the drivers at the moment, like myself, are doing 50, 60 hours because of the cost element. Sometimes we could always argue that the fare is sufficient in Medway. It's the volume of work that's not there, and that's a completely separate argument to today. But my main area and question I would like to ask is, obviously, the example of the methodology that was being presented is very basic. How do we adjust? I'm just going to the consultee replies. One of them said that the fare was too high, and he was referring to the fact that Tariff 2 kicks in at midnight, from midnight till 6. How do we address, as a whole, as a trade in Medway, to make sure that Tariff 2 kicks in at the right time? Do we need Tariff 2? That's another question and debate, but within the methodology, I'm finding it very difficult because it is very basic to understand that concept. So as the trade as a whole can put forward, because it's not just flag and yardage, there's time, there's the tariff changes, there's soilage charges, there's extras for passengers over 4 in a vehicle. There's lots of elements which I can't see within the policy as it stands.
I think that, Nigel, what you're saying is right, I think. And I think, let me just go, but also I get it from the team as well. I think, Councillor Fern, you were saying, I do remember that discussion. It was over, the policy's come about because we did ask that question, the three of us, I remember at the time pushing Mandy to do it. So we're really glad that the process started because there wasn't a policy in place. So that's I'm going to start on the positive first, I think, because that's the positive, right? I think, Mark, the comment made around the debate, I'm not sure we've got that history in front of you now to be able to say it was meant to go off and I know it's not got, it can't, as Nigel, you'd understand, it can't be led by the trade only, it has to be led by others. It would be a little bit concerning for us, obviously, if nothing in there is anything that was said by the MLTDA. And I know tonight, for all members, anyone that doesn't want to come in, I do know that we have the right to hold this for a moment. It doesn't have to go to the next council if we don't want it to. And it might be just about communication, not about loads of amendments, about how we got to that document and maybe look at a way forward. But did you want to just answer on, if you can, Mike? It doesn't matter if you can't, because I know Mandy was seeing it through the whole time. And I know you're not necessarily criticising officers. It's just about how we got here, really.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to. Yes, so I can't, like say, off the top of my head, comment on what's changed from the first meeting to the current format. I suppose what I can say is that the format that's in front of you and the content of it has also come about from discussions with senior management at Medway Council, who, and of course, there are, interested parties who have an input beyond the MLTDA. The brief and the purpose of this was very much for it to be that we were given by officer management what was for it to be put forward by officers, not to be led by the MLTDA on the basis that they don't represent the entirety of the taxi trade, and there is no guarantee that that will happen moving forwards. And so, without wishing to pass the buck, we've carried out the task that we've been set. I think in terms of the matter of changing the tariff, I don't disagree that changing the elements of the tariff is a problem, but consulting on each of those would be incredibly difficult. To carry out a consultation with multiple options for every single changeable element of the tariff would have hundreds of combinations, if not more. So to capture meaningful responses from a large trade with countless options, and then to present those to members in a meaningful way that would be of any assistance in helping, a revised tariff to be implemented, I can say from having been there and done it, it's an impossibility. The only way to get responses and be able to evaluate those is to make sure that what you're asking is relatively simple. Otherwise, it would be so incredibly complex that it would be prohibitive.
Thanks, Martin. I think before I go to other members, I think what Nigel was saying, though, is part of that process. I mean, I'm going to say, what I'm going to say about senior managers, right? Because I'm sure, Councillor Fern, we've had this discussion before, is that, licensing is separate from management. And we make the decisions here, as we do. I know you're well onto that, but I do appreciate what you're saying. But it's not for them to make the decision. But I think, Nigel, am I right in saying what you were saying is about the clarity around it was going to be when I say joint, it was going to be a joint working partnership approach to it, not where the MOTDA design it and then come out with the final option. But I think what Nigel's saying is it started that way, then just fell off the cliff and it didn't go any further. I mean, any other, Councillor Brown?
I did. Okay. Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions around this. Is this one? Yeah, try that one. Anyway, we came here tonight to review policy, and I think we're slightly into the realms of worrying about a process as to how to deliver something. Now, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the first thing that we've been asked to decide is if the policy should have a review period of annually or biannually. But that can sit in a policy. How we manage the increase or decrease, if somebody decided that that's what should happen, is in a procedure. And what I was going to suggest to the committee is that we take the policy element, which is for ours to decide, and that we allow officers to review the practicalities, taking into consideration what Councillor Fern said about improving the ability to have our consultation. I mean, it's disappointing that we contact 472 drivers and we get 4 responses. That's 1%. Well, it's less than 1%. And thankfully, the MLTDA at least got 90 responses. So we have a valid opinion, for want of a better word. But my suggestion is to actually hone down on what is a policy and what is a procedure, and to free licensing officers to make a decision around what's the best methodology. They can bring that back here, but it won't delay the decision around whether it should be annually or biannually. But the complexity can't be explained or understood, especially for somebody like me. I'm really pissed off. Okay, so the complexity is the problem on
Councillor Brown, would you like to carry on with your...
Thank you, Councillor Fern. No, what I was trying to... Can we... Oh, I don't believe... out of the... Separate a policy from a procedure in this. It does free up some more time to discuss it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I've got Councillor Fern, then I'll ask some questions after.
Yeah, just to clarify that point, are we actually discussing the frequency here of the review? Because this is just something that's come back off of the consultation that the MLTDA have done, not what we're deciding, is it?
We are discussing the review, the tariff review policy tonight, and part of that was around the frequency of this policy. This is like Mark said, this is a brand new policy that we've had. We've never had this before, so I mean I'm keen to get it right, which I will touch on in a moment. But yeah, so we are discussing the actual review policy for agreement to go forward to be agreed fully, but the MOTDA just bringing up the point of this review. And I know that we brought up, I think the last time we was here with Mandy and yourself, Mark, I remember we said about the annual part, so it's not something that's new. We have mentioned it a few times. Are you right, Councillor? So my only comments, my main comments would be, and I go from the bottom up, I think, is just, and this isn't no reflection on officers, so don't have a go at me. My only worry about, first thing I would say is around the drivers. I think plenty of the drivers have lost faith in us, partly around other aspects, around the out of area vehicles and certain companies that are operating here, I will say, illegally. So I'm not surprised on their lack of response, because they just see this as another policy, another thing, and you know, you understand what I'm saying, another thing that's on the shelf, and it's another policy for licensing. Hopefully, there was a lot of good stuff in it, not to attack drivers, but they probably have not much faith. And I do appreciate, Nigel, the MOTDA doing what you've done, because and I know Mandy and officers have always done that, because you go out and I know you do, you go on the ranks, you bang on the windows, you talk to people, and I know you do that. You make sure the drivers respond. Councillor Brown, the only comment I'd have around policy and procedure, obviously we're not here for the procedural bit, all those little bits and pieces that the team do, the licensing team do so well in Gravesham. My only worry is that whenever we bring up an issue here, and rightly so, licensing will straight away say it's in the policy. So, you know, the policy has to be right to hope to make sure that whatever's in that procedure matches the policy. And I know that's what you saw, you know, so for me, the two of them go together, but I know what you're saying. We're not here talking about, I'm certainly not here talking about yardage and what that means and how that operates. I suppose that's my comment on that. I think, Nigel, my one quick question to you on this, I'm really, I'm with Councillor Fern. I know we've discussed this simple way of doing things. I know, Mark, we've discussed it with you, and you'd be definitely looking at ways of the team to be able to operate more simpler. I suppose if we were looking, I'm not saying we are, if we were looking at that survey, that survey monkey to go out to just say, for example, to all the drivers, what would you be saying to the team would be a comfortable response rate? Because if it was something like this, and only, you know, 4 people might come back, but 100 drivers might say to you, yes, we want it, but only 4 people come back on the survey, obviously we wouldn't go with that annual review, and we just roll over until the biannual. So what would you be looking at?
In relation to engaging the trade, initially I would personally, from the responses I've got from drivers, to initially for them to be contacted, would you like to review the tariff or not on an annual basis? It's a very simple email, yes or no. The response rate from that will be I feel quite high. In relation to a survey, for example, the survey I did for this report took me 10 minutes on my phone while I was sat in a rank. It's very easy to set up. So I'm assuming once licensing then the team have got to grips with SurveyMonkey or whatever survey they're providing, user they're providing, once it's set up, it's going to be a very easy process to roll out. My main areas of concern was, obviously we've got several elements to the tariff. The policy is very vague in the word other. What does other mean in policy terms? Because I know when we're dealing with licensing policy, it has to be word perfect. And we refer to licensing policy for taking action against drivers, and it's very word perfect. The word other to me is a very vague concept when there's so many other elements to the tariff to consider that may be considered on a yearly basis. We could, for example, we've had several discussions on this, and I really appreciate the officers' time in engaging with the trade on this. And it's not an easy process to put together. There's so many suggestions I could put forward now, which perhaps we haven't got time to go over because it is a very complex situation. But the word other, it just rings a red flag to me as to, I don't know if Mark or Emily, you better give some more clarification on that for me, and for the members in the room, to kind of put forward as to what that actually means in relation to the policy, if you wouldn't mind.
I think if we can hold on that for a minute, though. So my question, I'll just go through my questions first because I think I have a way forward on this. I think, Mark, with what you're saying, and I get it. So even if we do a survey monkey, so just say for example that was September, and I'm going to go really low level. You're going to tell me more, but even if it's the simplest way, like Councillor Fern was saying. If you went out of a survey in September in, say, for example, it was 25, you're not done with it because say it was 25, and that comes back a full yes, by the time you're, from a statutory point of view, how statutory is this policy? It's not, it's a council policy, right? So when you say about the amount of work, I know there's a lot of work in it, but if it's a quick, another way of consulting and getting out there quicker than what we have done in the past, what would roughly be your timelines, just off the,
Has to do it in 26 anyway.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, but that's what I'm trying to work out. If it was, for example, in this year, would it finish by April, May of that year, and then you'll be doing it again at the end of the year? That's what I'm trying to work out, just for my benefit, even a simple term.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. What?
Yes.
What are we talking about?
But if we'd have to, from an officer's perspective, we'd have to design the consultation questions, figure out what to ask, and although we haven't been explicit, the intention would be to engage with the trade in formulating what we ask so that we make sure that those questions are appropriate. That takes weeks. We then need to carry out the consultation and give an appropriate consultation period for responses. We then need to evaluate and assess those responses. We'd need to I think what we were suggesting in this, to try and streamline it, is that we would then need to come to members to agree a draft tariff. There is then a statutory consultation period. You publish it
14 days.
for 14 days. And then if no objections are received, the tariff comes into play at a date set by the licensing authority. If there are objections, there's a further period within which it can be reconsidered. Once a new tariff has been decided, you then need to set an implementation date to give all of the taxi drivers an opportunity to have their meters changed. And then, of course, if we want to make sure that everybody has the correct tariff set, there then has to be a suitable period thereafter to give officers the opportunity to make sure that that's happened. So you can see that even in the simplest of examples, when you take into account the start of it to the finish, it takes months. You know, so if we're talking months every year, that's a significant burden, in my opinion, from an officer's perspective. But you know, we will do our best with whatever the member decision is. Yeah.
No. It just makes me wonder. It just makes about how less complicated it was without this policy. I suppose it was just, should we do something and let's go out and do it, rather than. I don't mean it as easy as that, but it seems to we seem to get ourselves into more the statutory, that even though it's our policy, it tends to go up in that red tape again, doesn't it? I think from my point of view, I think yeah, I mean, look, I'm on both sides of this, Nigel, right? I think you know, and I know Nigel knows this as well, but members know we've got a team that you are flat out, and we know that as well. My only issue, and I don't know whether members want to agree with this, my only problem is I'm minded, only temporarily, I'm minded to defer this for a moment, for two reasons actually though, Mark, and your feedback would be helpful. I just think that it would be really good to have some understanding around that beginning part, and it isn't just for the whole trade, but obviously Nigel was invited in to help design the process and just to add element. And again, we are a council. We don't, you know, we're not just doing it for one person. Don't worry, I'm on that line. But I think for a reassurance point of view, there needs to be a little bit of a communication to understand what's in the document. And whether you come away from that and communication, still disagree, and it comes back here and we have the final decision anyway. I know I am, and I know the Vice Chair and Councillor Fern would happily, if you have that communication offline, happily have a round table with you to see where that is, so that we can get back here and get this process sorted. I think that's where I think the relationships between are much better now than what they have been before, and I think this policy is getting to a place where we wanted a policy to be. I think it is. I just think it's about the reassurance, and I'm not asking you to go off and maybe Councillor Fern will go off and find a really easy way of you being able to do this much quicker, because there must be an easier ways of us to cut this red tape. But does that sound for you as well? I think if we were to defer, have that discussion yourselves, and if you need to catch up, if that's okay with members, needs to catch up with the spokes and with us, the Chair and Vice Chair, that's fine. And then we bring this back and make that decision. I think there's enough going through council at the moment anyway. I don't think it's that much of a, although maybe we should have got, I think we can do that. I don't know what members, Councillor Fern, as the opposition spoke to you, content with that?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. You know, how does that, I'd like to hear from Mark or everybody how that impacts on the sort of council programme really, because I know that was the plan, was to go to council in April, wasn't it?
See, Mark, we've got the other policy coming up as well, haven't we? For here.
So yes, the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire policy is due to be reviewed this year, and the new one coming in next year. So yes, we'd be doing that. We've obviously would need to be reviewing the Christmas tariff this year anyway. So we'd be doing that shortly. My sort of question, because Councillor Brown, you were mentioning the difference between policy and procedure, is that looking again at this after you've said that, a lot of this is procedure. So do we need the procedure part in there, or are we just wanting to decide, are we going to do it annually, biannually? That was all my...
I always like a bit of mix of both, as Mark would know, Emily, but Mark, go on.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to answer your question about deferring. Sorry, am I just being quiet? Sorry. Yeah, just to answer your question about deferring, Chair, not a problem from my perspective at all.
Thank you, Mark. And like I said, and Nigel, you know, I was saying it's for really just for that dialogue. It's not for members to, you know, we will make that decision, but it's just for that dialogue to happen and for us to go forward. Like you say, I think we are moving forward in a more open, transparent way, and we want to make sure that you're content with that as well as the MOTDA and drivers are as well. So, you know, Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question from my own personal point of view. We've got 470 odd metres to change. How quick, can you go through briefly, in words of one syllable, the procedure that you go through to change the meter?
Yeah, sure, obviously.
And how long does it take?
Once the tariff's been set, obviously, any tariff that's put forward for advertising to be implemented has to go through the meter agents in the first instance to ensure that the meters can be programmed. Once the tariff has been set, it's just a simple case of notifying the meter agents for them to draft the software. And literally you turn up at the meter agent as a driver with your meter, they reprogram the meter and with a new tariff card, and it's a very simple process. Cost-wise, it costs about £20–25 per driver to have the meter changed.
And once it's been changed, is there any indication on the actual meter to say what it's been changed to? You know, that's, you know, I mean, the licensing officer could come to a car in the rank and look at it. Oh, yours has been updated, it's just fine, or yours hasn't been. Why isn't it? Is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, generally when a meter gets upgraded, the driver gets issued with the new tariff card that
Right.
must be displayed in the vehicle, which would be an indicator for any licensing officer to ensure that that vehicle's been amended. Also, I do believe licensing want each driver to email confirmation that they've had the meter recalibrated, which will just be a case of taking a photograph or scanning the receipt from the meter agent to prove that that's been done.
Well, in my naivety, Chair, that doesn't seem to be much of a problem. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. I don't think we want to get ourselves into the full issues with that. I just think there are some unanswered questions. The dialogue is really good. There are some unanswered questions from us all, some from the team and some from you, Nigel, is around, you know, the meterage time. I think hopefully you've taken back some of the. What I don't want the licensing, you certainly, I know, wouldn't, and your drivers, because the licensing team are there to do other work. What we don't want any department to do is spend 9 months of every year in consultation and policy stuff. We want them doing the work, the enforcement, everything else, right? But I hope if we was to defer tonight, I hope it just for that open dialogue, and then we can bring this back to the next available meeting that into agreement with you guys to just decide where we go from there. What I don't want to do, I don't want to hold it off too long, because this is in the interest of the drivers and the trade, and it's certainly in the interest of this committee to have this policy. We need this. This policy certainly helps us with the decision making. Certainly does with your team, doesn't it? So, okay, Nigel, that's where we're. Members, I'll go to the Vice Chair. If she...
The committee agrees to defer the decision regarding.
I do. Okay. Defer the meeting, but also for that dialogue, and please welcome in offline if you want to welcome us in one of the short meetings just to confirm the dialogue is complete. That'd be great. Councillor Fern, you happy with that? Okay. Is that agreed, members?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. That concludes the meeting this evening. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.